The distress signal came through on all frequencies at once. The message was simple and desperate. A ship was dying in space, and everyone on board was about to die with it. The Harmony's light was a science vessel from the Galactic Union. It belonged to a species called the Vendari. The Vendari were peaceful people who spent their time studying the stars and making friends with other species. They did not believe in weapons or war. Their ships carried only basic shields and no guns at all. Now those shields were failing. 3 warships surrounded the Harmony's light. They belonged to the Krelak Dominion. The Krelak were known across the galaxy as raiders and warriors. They took what they wanted and killed anyone who stood in their way. Captain Celine sat in his command chair and watched death approach. His long fingers trembled as he sent out the distress call one more time. Around him, his crew worked frantically to keep the shields up for just a few more minutes. The Vendari were thin and tall, with pale blue skin and large eyes. They were built for thinking, not fighting. The Krelak boarding pods were already attached to his ship. He could hear them cutting through the hull. His people had no way to stop them. They had no weapons. They had no training for combat. All they could do was send their message into the void and hope someone heard it. Celine did not expect an answer. They were too far from any Union patrol. The nearest military base was 3 days away. His ship would be destroyed in 3 hours. Then his communications officer looked up. Her eyes were wide with surprise. Someone had answered. The ship was called the Iron Sparrow. It was a cargo freighter registered to Earth. The humans had only joined the Galactic Union 20 years ago. Most species still did not know much about them. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world. That meant it was one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. Celine had never met a human before. He had heard stories. Humans came from a world where everything tried to kill them. The gravity was too strong. The weather was too violent. The animals were too aggressive. Even the plants on Earth could kill you. Most species thought humans were crazy for living there. Some thought they were impressive for surviving it. But right now, Celine did not care where they came from. Someone had heard his call. That was all that mattered. On the Iron Sparrow, Captain Eleanor Reeves sat in her command chair and stared at the tactical display. She was a short woman with dark skin and gray hair tied back in a tight bun. She had been hauling cargo for 15 years. She knew the rules. When pirates attacked someone, you stayed away. You kept your head down, you reported it to the authorities and let them handle it. That was the smart thing to do. Her first officer, Marcus Chen, stood beside her. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and scars on his hands from his time in Earth's military. He looked at the display and frowned. 3 Krelak warships, 1 civilian science vessel. The math was simple. The Vendari were going to die. Marcus looked at his captain. He had served under her for 5 years. He knew what she was thinking. He could see it in her eyes. She was going to do something stupid, something brave, something very human. Elena took a deep breath. She thought about the regulations. She thought about her crew. She thought about her cargo of mining equipment. Then she thought about the Vendari dying alone in the dark. Humans had a saying. It was old. It came from the time before they went to space. The saying was simple. You did not leave people behind. You did not walk away when someone needed help. It did not matter if it was dangerous. It did not matter if the odds were against you. You helped. That was what made you human. Elena pressed the button for ship-wide communication. Her voice was calm and steady. She told her crew what was happening. She told them about the Vendari. She told them about the Krelak. Then she told them what she planned to do. There was a moment of silence. Then the responses came back. The engine crew said they could give her more power. The cargo handlers said they had ideas. The medical officer said she was preparing the bay for casualties. Not one person said no. Not one person said to run away. Elena looked at Marcus. He nodded. Then he smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knew they were about to do something dangerous and did not care. Elena turned to her pilot. A young woman named Sarah Kim sat at the controls. Sarah had grown up on Mars. She could fly anything. She had won racing championships before joining the cargo service. Elena gave the order. Sarah's hands moved across the controls. The Iron Sparrow changed course. They were heading toward the Krelak warships. On the Harmony's light, Silene watched his sensor display. The human ship was coming. It was not running away. It was not calling for help. It was coming straight at them. He did not understand. The Iron Sparrow was just a cargo ship. It had no weapons. It could not fight 3 Krelak warships. The humans were going to die trying to save them. His communications officer received a message from the humans. It was short. It was simple. It was in broken galactic standard, the common language of the Union. The message said, "We are coming." Hold on. Silene felt something he had not felt in hours. Hope. It was small. It was probably foolish. But it was there. The Krelak noticed the approaching ship. Warlord Thek sat on his command throne aboard the largest warship. He was massive, even for a Krelak. His scales were dark red, marked with scars from countless battles. He had been raiding ships for 30 years. He looked at the tactical display and laughed. A single cargo freighter was approaching his position. It was not even a military ship. The humans were either brave or stupid. Probably stupid. Thex had heard of humans. Everyone had. They were the new species. The ones from the death world. Some people said they were dangerous. Thex thought that was funny. How dangerous could they be? They had only been in space for 20 years. They did not even have proper warships yet. He ordered his communications officer to send a message. He told the humans to leave. He told them this was not their concern. He told them that if they did not run away, he would destroy them. The response came back quickly. The human captain's voice was calm. Too calm. She spoke in perfect galactic standard now. Someone on her crew must be a translator. She said, "We are here for the Vendari. Leave them alone." Thex laughed again. Then he gave the order to fire. The first plasma bolt missed the Iron Sparrow by 300 meters. The second one came closer. The third would have hit them if Sarah Kim was not the best pilot in the system. The freighter twisted in space. It moved in ways that should not be possible for a ship that size. Sarah's hands danced across the controls. Her eyes were locked on the tactical display. She could see the enemy fire coming. She could predict where it would go. She moved the ship before the weapons even fired. The Krelak weapons officer was confused. He had never seen a cargo ship move like that. Most civilian ships could barely dodge asteroids. This one was dancing through weapons fire like it was nothing. What he did not understand was that humans came from a heavy gravity world. Earth's gravity was almost twice what most species considered normal. Humans had evolved to survive forces that would kill other beings. Their bodies were built stronger. Their bones were denser. Their muscles were tougher. When Sarah threw the Iron Sparrow into a violent turn, the gravity forces inside the ship spiked to 4 times Earth normal. That would crush most species. It would break their bones. It would cause their organs to fail. It would make them pass out. Sarah felt the pressure. Her vision narrowed at the edges. Her arms felt heavy, but she kept flying. This was nothing compared to the training she had done on Mars. Nothing compared to racing ships through canyons at impossible speeds. She had been pulling high-gravity maneuvers since she was 16 years old. The rest of the crew felt it too. Marcus gripped his console and gritted his teeth. Elena stayed perfectly still in her command chair. Her eyes never left the display. In the cargo bay, the crew strapped themselves in and prepared for what came next. Elena spoke calmly into her communication device. She gave the order. The cargo bay doors opened. The Iron Sparrow was hauling mining equipment. That included 50 tons of processed metal in shipping containers. Each container was 3 meters long and made of reinforced steel. They were designed to survive being dropped from orbit onto planetary surfaces. Now they were weapons. The cargo crew used their loading mechs to push the containers out of the bay. But they did not just drop them. They threw them. They aimed them. They used the ship's movement and their timing to send those containers flying toward the Krelak warships at incredible speeds. In space, there is no friction. There is no air resistance. When you throw something, it keeps moving. It keeps accelerating. A 3-ton container moving at 1,000 meters per second has more kinetic energy than most missiles. The Krelek sensors detected the containers. But they were not worried. These were just cargo boxes. They were not missiles. They were not torpedoes. The sensors classified them as debris and ignored them. That was a mistake. The first container hit the smallest Krelak destroyer on its port side. The impact was devastating. The container punched through the shields like they were not there. It tore through the hull. It kept going until it hit something important deep inside the ship. The destroyer's reactor lost containment. There was a bright flash. Then the ship split in half. The other Krelak ships stopped firing at the Iron Sparrow. They stared at their screens in shock. A cargo freighter had just destroyed a military warship with a box. More containers were coming. The Krelak ships tried to shoot them down. Their point defense systems activated. Energy beams cut through space. Some containers exploded, but others got through. Another container hit the second destroyer. This one struck the engine section. The ship did not explode, but it stopped moving. Its power systems went offline. It was dead in space. Warlord Thex watched this happen from his command throne. He could not believe what he was seeing. The humans were winning. They were winning with a cargo ship and some boxes. This should not be possible. He roared orders at his crew. He demanded they destroy the human ship immediately. He ordered all weapons to fire at once. The Iron Sparrow was hit. A plasma bolt struck the aft section. The shields flared and died. Alarms blared through the ship. Elena felt the impact through her chair. Damage reports came in. They had lost their shield generator. They had lost half their maneuvering thrusters. They were hurt, but they were still flying. Elena looked at Marcus. They both knew what came next. They had bought the Vendari some time. They had crippled 2 Krelak ships, but they could not fight the Warlord's flagship alone. It was too big, too heavily armed, too well protected. Marcus picked up his combat gear. He looked at his captain and nodded. She nodded back. If they could not save the Vendari by destroying the Krelak ships, then they would save them the hard way. They would board the Harmony's light. They would get the Vendari off that ship. They would fight the Krelak hand-to-hand if they had to. That was insane. That was suicide. That was exactly what humans would do. On the Harmony's light, Captain Celine watched the human ship fight. He could not speak. He could not move. He just stared at his screen and tried to understand what he was seeing. The humans had destroyed 1 Krelak warship. They had disabled another. They did it with a cargo freighter. They did it with shipping containers. They did it with flying that should have killed them. His communications officer received another message from the Iron Sparrow. This one was longer. It was detailed. It was urgent. The humans were going to board his ship. They were going to evacuate his crew. They needed him to seal off certain sections. They needed him to get his people to the main cargo bay. They needed him to trust them. Celine did not hesitate. He gave the orders. His crew moved through the ship. They avoided the sections where the Krelak had cut through. They ran toward the cargo bay. They sealed doors behind them. They prepared for extraction. The Krelak boarding teams heard the doors closing. They heard the Vendari running. They pursued. But the Vendari had a head start now. The humans had given them that. The Iron Sparrow moved alongside the Harmony's light. Sarah brought them in close. Too close. The 2 ships were almost touching. It was dangerous. One wrong move and they would collide. But Sarah did not make wrong moves. Marcus stood in the airlock with 5 other crew members. They all wore basic exosuits. These were not military armor. They were just work suits designed for spacewalks and heavy labor, but they would have to do. Each human carried tools. Cutting torches, pry bars, welding equipment. Some carried actual weapons. Marcus had a rifle. It was old. It was from Earth. It used chemical propellants to fire metal bullets. Most species thought that was primitive. But Marcus had used this rifle in 3 different wars. He trusted it more than any energy weapon. The airlock opened. Marcus jumped across the gap between the ships. The others followed. They used magnetic boots to stick to the hull of the Vendari ship. They moved to the cargo bay door. The door was locked. That did not matter. One of the crew members used a plasma cutter. The metal glowed red, then white, then it melted. They cut through the door in 90 seconds. The humans entered the ship. The cargo bay was full of Vendari. There were 20 of them. They looked terrified. They had never seen humans before. The humans looked scary in their work suits. They looked even scarier when Marcus pulled out his rifle. But Captain Silene stepped forward. He spoke in Galactic Standard. He told his crew that these humans were here to help. He told them to follow the humans. He told them everything would be all right. Marcus looked at the Vendari. They were so thin, so fragile. They looked like they would break if you touched them too hard. He felt something strange in his chest. Protection. These people needed help. His people would give it. Then he heard the sound. It came from deeper in the ship. Footsteps, heavy footsteps. The Krellick were coming. Marcus turned to his team. He pointed at two of them. He told them to get the Vendari back to the Iron Sparrow. He told them to move fast. He told them not to stop for anything. Then he looked at the other three. They knew what he wanted. They had all served in the military. They had all been in combat. They knew what to do. They were going to hold this position. They were going to give the Vendari time to escape. They were going to show the Krellick what happened when you attacked someone under human protection. The Krellick raiders burst through the door. There were 6 of them. They were big. Each one was over 2 meters tall and covered in scales. They carried energy weapons and wore armor. They were professional warriors who had been fighting for years. They saw the humans. They laughed. 4 small beings in work suits. This would be easy. Then Marcus opened fire. The sound of the rifle was loud in the enclosed space. The first Krellick went down. Then the second. The humans moved with precision and speed. They used cover. They worked together. They fought like a pack of wolves hunting prey. The Krellick realized too late that these were not civilians. These were soldiers. These were predators from a death world. These were humans. The fight did not last long. Marcus and his team moved through the corridors of the Vendari ship like they owned it. They had trained for this. Earth's military did not prepare soldiers for easy battles. They prepared them for the worst possible situations. Fighting in narrow corridors against larger enemies was something they practiced every day. The Krellick were good fighters. They were strong and well-armed. But they had never fought humans before. They did not understand what they were facing. Humans were pack hunters. On Earth, their ancestors had hunted animals much larger and stronger than themselves. They did it by working together, by communicating, by thinking 3 steps ahead. Those instincts were still there. Those skills were still sharp. Marcus signaled with his hand. 2 of his team moved down a side corridor. The Krellick did not see them. They were focused on Marcus and the person beside him. When the Krellick advanced, the humans hit them from 2 sides at once. It was a classic flanking maneuver. Simple, effective, deadly. The Krellick fell back. They were not used to prey that fought like this. Most species in the galaxy did not have Earth's history of warfare. Most species fought in organized lines with clear rules. Humans fought to win. They fought dirty. They fought smart. One Krellick tried to charge Marcus. It was a brave move. The Krellick was twice his size and wore heavy armor. But Marcus did not try to fight it head-on. He sidestepped. He used the enemy's momentum against it. As the Krellick passed him, Marcus shot it in the back where the armor was weakest. Another team member threw something down the corridor. It was a flashbang grenade. The explosion of light and sound was not lethal, but it did not need to be. The Krellick's eyes were sensitive. They were adapted for low light conditions. The bright flash blinded them temporarily. That was all the humans needed. Marcus checked the corridor ahead. It was clear. He signaled his team to advance. They moved quickly. They cleared each room as they went. They made sure no Krellick were behind them. This was basic infantry tactics. But to the Krellick, it looked like magic. The humans reached the cargo bay where the Vendari were waiting. They had already started moving the aliens back to the Iron Sparrow. Captain Silene was helping his crew across. His long legs shook with fear, but he did not run. He made sure everyone else went first. Marcus counted the Vendari. 20 of them. All alive. All moving. Good. He turned to his team. They were all still standing. No serious injuries. Even better. But they were not done yet. Marcus had one more job to do. He pulled out a set of small devices from his pack. They were demolition charges. Not very powerful ones, but powerful enough. He placed them at key points throughout the boarding section of the ship. Near fuel lines, near power conduits, near structural supports. His team knew what he was doing. They covered him while he worked. They watched for more Krellick. The charges were on timers. Marcus set them for 5 minutes. That was enough time to get everyone clear. Just barely. The last Vendari crossed over to the Iron Sparrow. Captain Selene looked back at his ship. It was dying. The Krelak had torn it apart. But his people were alive. That was what mattered. Marcus was the last human to leave. He jumped across the gap between ships and pulled himself into the Iron Sparrow's airlock. The doors closed behind him. Sarah Kim fired the maneuvering thrusters. The freighter moved away from the Vendari vessel. 30 seconds later, the charges detonated. The explosions were small, but they were placed perfectly. The Krelak boarding craft that was attached to the Harmony's light came apart. The raiders who were still inside died instantly. The ones who had been pursuing the humans were cut off from their ship. The Harmony's light was lost. But the Krelak could not use it now. They could not salvage it. They could not steal anything from it. Marcus had made sure of that. On the Iron Sparrow, the medical officer was helping the Vendari. They were in shock. Some were injured. All were exhausted. The medical officer moved among them with calm efficiency. She spoke softly. She offered water. She checked for injuries. The Vendari stared at her. They stared at all the humans. These beings had just fought their way through a Krelak boarding party. They had killed trained warriors. They had done it to save strangers. They had risked their lives for people they had never met. Captain Selene found Captain Reeves on the bridge. She was standing beside her chair watching the tactical display. Her expression was grim. The fight was not over. Warlord Thex still had one functional warship. It was damaged but operational. And he was angry. Very angry. Selene approached Elena carefully. He did not want to interrupt. But he needed to say something. He needed to thank her. Elena looked at him. Up close, she could see how different the Vendari were from humans. So tall, so thin, so delicate. They looked like they would break in a strong wind. She wondered how they survived in space at all. Selene tried to speak. His translator worked, but his voice shook. He said thank you. He said it again. He said he did not understand why the humans had helped them. He said he would never forget this. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she said something simple. She said they did it because it was right. She said they did it because no one deserved to die alone in the dark. She said they did it because that was what humans did. Selene did not understand. Most species in the galaxy did not help strangers. It was too dangerous, too risky, too expensive. You looked after your own people and left everyone else alone. That was how you survived, but humans were different. They had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. They had survived by working together, by helping each other, by refusing to leave anyone behind. Those instincts were deep. Those values were strong. An alarm beeped on the tactical display. Sarah called out a warning. The Krelak flagship was moving. It was coming straight for them. Elena returned to her command chair. She looked at her crew. They were tired. They were hurt. Their ship was damaged. They were out of tricks. They had no shields. They had no cargo left to throw. They barely had working engines. The Krelak warship had them. One more shot and the Iron Sparrow would be destroyed. Everyone on board would die. The humans, the Vendari, all of them. Elena opened a communication channel to the Krelak ship. Warlord Thex appeared on the screen. His face was twisted with rage. He promised to kill them all slowly. He promised to make them suffer for what they had done to his fleet. Elena looked at him calmly. Then she said something that made everyone on the bridge stop and listen. She said this was his last chance. She said he could withdraw now and live. She said if he continued his attack, he would not survive. Thex laughed. He asked what she could possibly do. Her ship was crippled. She had no weapons. She had no backup. She was bluffing. Elena smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something you did not. She said one word. Just one word, actually. Then she ended the communication. She turned to Marcus. He was already moving. He opened a secure communication channel. He sent out a coded message. He had sent it before hours ago. Now he was sending it again. Just to make sure it had been received, the reply came back immediately. 2 words, already here. On the Krelak flagship, the weapons officer suddenly shouted a warning. New contacts, 2 of them. Large, military. They had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Thex spun to look at his sensors. His blood ran cold. 2 human warships had arrived. They were not cargo freighters. They were not civilian ships. They were military vessels, real ones, the kind that were built to fight wars. One was a destroyer. The other was a frigate. They were sleek and deadly. They bristled with weapons. Their engines glowed with power. They had been there the whole time, watching, waiting, following the Iron Sparrow from a distance, ready to respond if the civilian ship got into trouble. Earth did not send its people into space without protection. Not anymore, not after learning how dangerous the galaxy could be. Every civilian ship had a military escort. You just could not see them until they wanted to be seen. The lead warship sent a message. The voice was calm, professional. It identified itself as the Earth destroyer Valkyrie. It ordered the Krelek to surrender immediately or be destroyed. Warlord Thex looked at his tactical display. He looked at his damaged ship. He looked at his dead crew members. He looked at the 2 fresh human warships that were powering up their weapons. For the first time in 30 years of raiding, Thex felt fear. The human warships did not wait for an answer. They had already scanned the situation. They had seen the destroyed Krelak ships. They had seen the damaged freighter. They had seen the Vendari refugees. They knew exactly what had happened here. The destroyer Valkyrie moved first. It was fast. Much faster than its size suggested. It circled around the Krelak flagship like a shark circling wounded prey. Its sensors swept over the enemy ship. It was looking for weaknesses. It was building a tactical profile. It was preparing to attack. The frigate Persistent took a different position. It moved to protect the Iron Sparrow. It placed itself between the civilian freighter and the Krelak warship. Its weapons were armed. Its shields were up. The message was clear. You will not touch them. Warlord. Thex stared at his screens. He was trying to think, trying to find a way out. He had fought against many species over the years. He knew their tactics. He knew their weaknesses. But he had never fought humans before. Not real human warships with trained military crews. He ordered his weapons officer to fire at the destroyer. Maybe he could damage it. Maybe he could scare them off. Maybe he could buy enough time to escape. The plasma bolts left his ship. They streaked through space. They should have hit. The targeting was perfect. The destroyer was right there. But the Valkyrie was not there anymore. It had moved. It had predicted the shot. It had changed position before the weapons even fired. The Krelak weapons officer could not understand it. No ship could move that fast. Then the human ships returned fire. The Valkyrie used railguns. These were old weapons by galactic standards. They were simple. They used magnetic fields to throw metal slugs at incredible speeds. Most species preferred energy weapons, lasers, plasma cannons, particle beams. Those were more sophisticated, more efficient, but railguns had one advantage. They hit hard, very hard. The first slug punched through the Krelak flagship's shields. They barely slowed it down. The second slug hit the engine section. There was an explosion. Not a big one. Just enough to disable the main drive. The Krelak ship could not run now. It could not maneuver. It was stuck. The frigate fired next. It used missiles. Dozens of them. They were not like the missiles that most species used. These were smart weapons. They could think. They could adapt. They could work together. The Krelak point defense systems tried to shoot them down. They succeeded with some. But the missiles learned. They changed their approach. They came from different angles. They coordinated their attack. Some missiles acted as decoys. Others struck critical systems. The Krelak flagship lost its weapons. Then its shields. Then its communications. The human ships were not trying to destroy it. They were surgically disabling it. They were taking it apart piece by piece. On the Iron Sparrow, Captain Silene watched in amazement. He had seen space battles before. He had studied military tactics. But this was different. This was not a fight. This was a hunt. The humans were not just fighting. They were dominating. Elena Reeves watched too. She felt relief. Her crew was safe. The Vendari were safe. Help had arrived. But she also felt something else. Pride. Those were human ships out there. Her people. They had come when called. They had brought the full weight of Earth's military might. They had shown the galaxy what humans could do when they chose to fight. The commander of the Valkyrie sent another message to Thex. This time it was not a request. It was a statement. The Krelek would surrender now. They would shut down all systems. They would prepare to be boarded. They had no other choice. Thex looked around his bridge. His crew was scared. His ship was dying. He had lost. He had lost completely. A cargo freighter had crippled 2 of his ships. Now human warships had disabled his flagship without even taking damage. He had underestimated them. That mistake would cost him everything. He gave the order. His crew shut down their weapons. They lowered what was left of their shields. They stopped fighting. The Valkyrie moved closer. A boarding craft detached from its hull. It was small but heavily armored. Inside were human marines, real soldiers, not cargo handlers pretending to be warriors. These were trained killers in military-grade combat suits. They entered the Krelek flagship through one of the holes the missiles had made. They moved through the ship quickly and efficiently. They secured the bridge. They detained the crew. They made sure there would be no more resistance. Thex was taken into custody. He did not resist. What was the point? The humans had won. They had won so completely that resistance was meaningless. The Marine commander approached him. She was shorter than Thex, much shorter, but she did not look up at him with fear. She looked at him with contempt. She told him he was charged with piracy, with attempted murder, with attacking a civilian vessel. He would be taken to a Galactic Union court. He would be tried for his crimes. Thex asked why the humans cared. The Vendari were not their people. This was not their fight. They had no reason to risk themselves. The Marine looked at him like he was speaking a foreign language. She said they cared because someone had asked for help. She said they cared because it was the right thing to do. She said that was what humans did. They protected people who could not protect themselves. Thex did not understand. In his culture, you looked after your own. You took what you could from others. That was how you survived. That was how you prospered. The idea of risking your life for strangers was alien to him, but as the Marines led him away, he realized something. The galaxy had changed. For decades, the Krelek had raided with impunity. They had attacked whoever they wanted. They had taken whatever they pleased. The other species were too scared or too weak to stop them. Now there were humans. Humans who did not run. Humans who did not back down. Humans who came when you called for help. But humans who would also hunt you down if you hurt innocent people. The game had changed. The rules were different now. Back on the Iron Sparrow, the Vendari were recovering. The human medical officer had treated their injuries. She had given them food and water. She had found them places to rest. She had done it all with kindness and care. Captain Celine sat in the mess hall. He was drinking something hot. The humans called it tea. It tasted strange, but it was warm, and that was comforting. Around him, his crew was slowly relaxing. The fear was fading. They were safe. Marcus Chen sat down across from him. He was out of his exosuit now. He looked tired. There was a bandage on his arm where a Krelek weapon had grazed him. But he was smiling. Celine looked at him for a long moment. Then he asked the question that had been bothering him. Why did the humans help? They had risked everything. They had fought against overwhelming odds. They had done it all for strangers. Why? Marcus thought about it. Then he told Celine about Earth. He told him about the hurricanes and earthquakes, the floods and fires, the predators that hunted in the night, the diseases that killed millions. Earth was a world that tried to kill you every single day. But humans survived. They survived because they worked together, because they helped each other. Because when someone was in trouble, everyone else came running. That was how you lived through a disaster. That was how you survived on a death world. Those instincts were deep. Those values were fundamental to being human. You did not leave people behind. You did not ignore calls for help. You did not stand by and watch others suffer. Not if you could do something about it. Celine listened. He began to understand. The humans were not heroes. They were not warriors looking for glory. They were just people who had learned to survive by taking care of each other. And now they were in space. They were meeting other species. And they were bringing those values with them. He asked Marcus what would happen next. Marcus said they would take the Vendari to the nearest Union station. They would make sure everyone was safe. They would help them contact their families. They would do whatever was needed. Celine thanked him again. Marcus shrugged. He said it was no big deal. Anyone would have done the same thing. But Celine knew that was not true. Most species would not have done this. Most would have run away. The humans were different, special, and the galaxy was going to have to learn what that meant. 3 days later, the Iron Sparrow docked at Union Station Kepler. It was a massive structure that orbited a blue giant star. Thousands of ships passed through it every day. Hundreds of species lived and worked there. It was one of the busiest places in the galaxy. When the news arrived about what had happened, everything stopped. The story spread through the station like wildfire. A human cargo ship had responded to a distress call. They had fought 3 Krelak warships. They had saved 20 Vendari civilians. They had done it without hesitation. By the time the Iron Sparrow arrived, there was a crowd waiting. Station security had to set up barriers to control it. Representatives from a dozen different species wanted to see the humans, wanted to meet them, wanted to understand them. Captain Elena Reeves stood at the airlock. She was tired. Her ship was damaged. Her crew was exhausted. They had been through hell. All she wanted was a hot shower and a long sleep. But when the doors opened and she saw the crowd, she understood. Something had changed, something important. The Vendari disembarked first. Captain Celine led his crew off the ship. They were met by other Vendari who had been waiting. There were emotional reunions, families embracing, friends crying with relief. The Vendari were a peaceful people, but they understood the value of life. These 20 souls had been saved from certain death. Celine turned back to look at Elena. He raised his long hand in a gesture of respect. She nodded back. No words were needed. They both knew what had happened out there. They both knew what it meant. Elena and her crew walked through the station. People stared at them. Some looked afraid. Humans were still new, still unknown, still from that terrifying death world. But others looked at them with something different. Respect, gratitude, hope. A Galactic Union official met them at the customs checkpoint. He was a Therian, tall and covered in silver fur. He looked uncomfortable. He told Elena that there would be an inquiry. The humans had engaged in military action without authorization. They had used weapons in Union space. There were regulations. There were protocols. Elena listened patiently. Then she asked a simple question. What should they have done? Should they have ignored the distress call? Should they have let the Vendari die? The official did not have an answer. The rules said one thing, but morality said something else. He eventually told her that the inquiry would probably not go anywhere. The Vendari were already calling the humans heroes. Public opinion was overwhelmingly positive. No one wanted to punish the people who had saved innocent lives. Over the next few days, the story continued to spread. It reached every corner of the galaxy. News services reported it. Social networks discussed it. Governments debated it. The humans had done something unprecedented. They had risked everything for strangers. They had fought when others would have run. They had won against impossible odds. Other species began to look at humans differently. Before, they had been seen as primitive, dangerous, barbaric. People from a world so hostile that most species could not even land on it. But now they were seen as something else, protectors, warriors who fought for others, people who came when you called for help. The requests started coming in. Small cargo companies wanted human crews. Colony ships wanted human escorts. Remote stations wanted human security. Everyone wanted the Deathworlders on their side. Earth's government was flooded with diplomatic communications, trade agreements, defense pacts, cultural exchanges. Species that had barely acknowledged humanity before now wanted to be friends, wanted to be allies, wanted to be protected. Elena sat in a bar on the station. It was a quiet place that served drinks from 100 different worlds. Marcus sat beside her. They were both drinking Earth whiskey. It was expensive here, but worth it. A taste of home after everything they had been through. She looked at the news screen on the wall. It was showing footage of the battle. Someone had recorded it from long-range sensors. You could see the Iron Sparrow dodging fire. You could see the cargo containers hitting the Krelak ships. You could see the human warships arriving. It looked dramatic. It looked heroic. It looked like something from a movie. But Elena remembered what it really felt like. The fear, the uncertainty. The moment when she had to decide whether to help or run. That had not been heroic. That had just been doing what was right. Marcus received a message on his datapad. He read it and smiled. He showed it to Elena. It was from Earth Command. They were commending the crew of the Iron Sparrow for their actions. They were being given medals, bonuses, recognition. But there was more. Earth Command was establishing a new program. They were going to station more military ships along civilian routes. They were going to train more people in emergency response. They were going to make sure that what happened to the Harmony's light never happened again. Not on their watch. Elena felt something shift inside her. Pride, not for herself. For her species. Humanity had been in space for only 20 years. They were still newcomers, still learning, still figuring out their place in the galaxy, but they had made their statement. They had shown everyone who they were, what they stood for. Humans would protect the weak. They would answer distress calls. They would fight when necessary. They would not stand by and watch others suffer. That was not the human way. That would never be the human way. A Vendari entered the bar. It was Captain Silene. He spotted Elena and Marcus and approached their table. He asked if he could join them. They said yes. Silene ordered a drink. Something blue and glowing. He looked at Elena for a long time before speaking. Then he said something that surprised her. He said the Vendari Council had voted. They wanted to establish a formal alliance with Earth. They wanted human ships to patrol their trade routes. They wanted human advisors to help train their security forces. They wanted to learn from the humans. Elena asked why. The Vendari were peaceful. They did not like violence. Why would they want to work with humans? With warriors from a death world? Silene said it was because they had learned something. Peace was precious. But peace had to be protected. For too long, the Vendari had believed that if they were kind and gentle, others would be kind and gentle in return. But the galaxy did not work that way. There were predators out there. There were people like the Krelek who took what they wanted and hurt whoever got in their way. The Vendari still believed in peace, but now they understood that sometimes you needed warriors to protect that peace. You needed people who were willing to fight, who were willing to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. You needed humans. Elena thought about that. She thought about Earth, about the long history of violence and war, about the millions who had died in conflicts over resources and ideology and territory. Humans knew war. They knew it too well. They had spent thousands of years fighting each other, but they had also learned something from all that suffering. They had learned that some things were worth fighting for, that some causes were just, that sometimes violence was necessary to stop greater violence. They had learned to channel their aggressive instincts into protection rather than conquest. Maybe that was humanity's role in the galaxy. Not to be conquerors, not to be raiders, but to be guardians. To be the ones who stood up when others could not. To be the Deathworlders who protected everyone else. Elena raised her glass. She looked at Marcus and Silene. She said they had started something here, something that would change the galaxy. The other species would learn that humans were not just survivors. They were protectors. They were the ones who answered when you called for help. They were the ones who would fight for you even if they barely knew you. She said that was the human way, to help, to protect, to stand together against the darkness. That was what made them different. That was what made them strong. Marcus and Silene raised their glasses too. They drank together. 3 people from different worlds, different species, different backgrounds, but united by something simple and profound. The belief that some things were worth fighting for, that some people were worth saving, that doing the right thing mattered. Outside, the galaxy continued to turn. But it was different now. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. Later that night, Elena returned to her ship. The Iron Sparrow was in dry dock. Repairs had already started. The damage was not as bad as they had feared. In a few weeks, they would be ready to fly again. She checked her messages. There were hundreds of them. Interview requests, job offers, thank you notes from people she had never met. She ignored most of them. But one caught her attention. It was from a small colony on the edge of Union space. They were having trouble with raiders. They had sent out requests for help, but no one had responded. They were too far away, too unimportant, too risky to defend, but they had heard about the Iron Sparrow. They had heard about the humans who came when called. They were asking for help. They were asking if anyone would come. Elena read the message twice. Then she smiled. She sent a reply. It was short. It was simple. It was very human. We are coming. Hold on.